And then, one day, I stumbled upon Lean and began this wild journey. So, I'm hoping you know nothing about Lean. Lean manufacturing was kind of the brainchild of a guy, Taiichi Ono, who worked for Toyota way back in the day. So this is post-World War II Japan. They have nothing. They have very limited customer base, very limited natural resources, very limited cash flow. Just, they have nothing. So they had to start really utilizing what they had fully. And, talking to people about Japanese culture anywhere, there's kind of this natural built-in respect for resources. Somebody filtered that water, why are you leaving it on while you're brushing your teeth kind of thing. So, which is cool, and I'll talk about that more in depth later. But I started this deep dive into Lean and started reading everything, watching all the videos that I could find, taking online training courses. I went and did an LES, which is a Lean Environment Simulator course at a local college, Center for Employee Development with Steve Answini. Awesome. Super cool. Learning all this stuff. So much stuff. Reading about how Toyota started utilizing their resources, and to the degree that, I hope I don't butcher this, but to the degree that the other car manufacturers in Japan were like, they're cheating. Basically, we need to go and find out how on earth they're being profitable given this situation. I mean, we're talking about at one point, Toyota was manufacturing a truck that had one headlight and one set of brakes because they had to maximize the utilization of their resources. Dude, whoa. So what they started doing is they started to look at processes. They started using a system called Kanban, where you've got two bins. This is a really simple example, but that's where we're at. This is why I'm hoping you don't know anything about Lean. You've got two bins. There's a mosquito. You've got two bins. You've got your parts. Same part in both bins, but on the front of the second bin, this is just an example, I'm going to use a different color, you've got a card. And that card says what the parts are and how many parts there should be and where you get them from, okay? When you've used all the parts in this bin, you pull this card and you put it on a board, a Kanban board. Kanban in Japanese basically means signal, okay? So this is a signal card saying, hey, alert, we're out of this part, go here to get more. You pull that before you use the parts in the second bin. What that means is, before this second bin is empty, the first bin should be refilled with the Kanban. Super simple management of inventory. I will tell you, trying to figure out how to manage inventory is insane. We don't even have that many suppliers. And one of our biggest downfalls as a company has been running out of stuff. Hey, I don't have any of those 9/16 bolts. Hey, I just used the last pump. Have you ordered more? And so we've used Kanban a lot to try and signal to ourselves when we're low on stuff before we're out. So 2 bins per part, Kanban on that. So that's one of the first things that they started to do. There's a lot here. So I just want to touch on some stuff that's been super impactful. I would love to talk about this more in depth. If you've got any questions or you're like, hey, how can this affect me as a small-time knife maker? Because it can. How can this affect me as a small-time producer? Well, Kanban's great. You've probably got to manage a couple pieces. Maybe you've got to manage your abrasive usage. This is a great way to just ensure. If there's anything that you run out of pretty regularly, even if it's just you, there's going to be things, materials. Kanban and a system of information and signaling you that you need to reorder, really, really good. I'll just tell you too, the Kanbans that we have at the shop are just a card, and they will say, this is a flap wheel, so a flap disc. Flap disc, we order this flap disc, here I'll draw it. great to have a picture of it on there too. This flap disc, we order it from Amazon. Order 10. So you have 2 bins. That would be 10 flap wheels, 10 flap wheels. When you go to use the second one, you pull the Kanban reorder, the refills, and you can play with quantities. I bet you're seeing the issue here. Well, this is going to be lower by the time you figure it out. This is a great little Kanban that we use in the shop. Let me wipe this off. Kanban's great. Management of your inventory is great. If you're in a tiny little shop, there's something way more important. Woo! One of the biggest things that I struggle with, a lot less now, but a lot of the people that we hire struggle with, a lot of people have this sense of mass production. Henry Ford created mass production as we know it in like a long time ago. And when he did so, it worked because he was making one product. And he had to he had to make them because he could not make them faster than he could sell them. That's a very specific, a hyper specific, given the client the climate of that environment. I mean, people were still doing horse and buggies, and other people were trying to make better horse and buggies. Henry Ford came in and said, nope, I'm going to make a car, and I'm going to make it super cheap so that everybody can buy it. And there is so much there. If you haven't read a couple books by written by Henry Ford, Today and Tomorrow, and I think it's called My Life. I'll look that up and post it in the area where you write the caption of this. I'll try to see. I think it's called My Life's Work or something like that. Today and Tomorrow, though, was the really impactful one for me. Just gave me a lot of information about his thought process. Henry Ford was a wild dude, and he did some weird stuff. Don't get me wrong, but he accomplished a lot and was very explorative and creative, and put people in positions and said, we don't know how to do this, so figure it out. Anyway, things that other people said you couldn't do, like linen and glass and all kinds of cool stuff. But a lot of people that come into the shop are used to or think that they understand that things are made en masse. You make a big batch, and in that batch you drill all the holes, and then you change the drill bit and you drill the next round of holes, and then you move over and you grind them all, and then you move over and you bam, 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 and you've got this big batch. Bam, big batch of parts. And every process, let's say you've got 40 parts. Let's say you're making hammers, and you've got 40 hammers, and you take them through, and you punch them all, and you drift them all, and you fuller them, and you shape the faces, and then you grind them, and then you heat treat them all. Well, what if you have 10 orders? 10 orders. What if Jim ordered hammer number 1? Okay. Well, Jim has to wait on you to make hammer number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 40. Jim is waiting on hammer number 1, but he has to wait for you to finish processing the entire batch. That means that Jim is waiting. And if you start to delve into Lean It All, you're going to hear the term waste. There are 8 wastes. One of the biggest wastes is waiting. Hammer number 1 is waiting to be finished. Jim is waiting on hammer number 1. He doesn't need you to make 40. He needs 1. Even if you have 40 orders, Jim was first. Jim is waiting on number 1. You will feel like you are completing things much more efficiently when you are going through, okay, I don't have to change the drill bit between each one. I just work my way through it. It seems efficient. But Jim's waiting. So instead of batch work, we're going to do what's called one-piece flow. Jim's hammer is going to get punched, drifted, shaped, ground, heat treated, handled, packaged, and shipped. And then you're going to start on hammer number 2. Wild. Because, for example, you have, let's say, an 8-hour day. Let's say that from start to finish per hammer, it takes you 6.5 hours to make a hammer, if you make them in a batch. Well, that means that in your 8-hour day, Jim's order is done. If you've set the expectation of a 2-week lead time, then you might feel relaxed and you might be shipping all of your orders out on that last day, or Jim could have gotten shipped on day 1. You could have set your lead time less, which means that you're managing the money of less people that are in process. When you're doing commission work, especially, people are paying you and you're sitting on their cash. If that lead time starts to fluctuate, which anybody that does commission work has experienced at one point or another, it becomes a really complicated situation. You've got to manage the funds, you've got to manage the work in process, you have to track where you're at and have constant communication with that customer. If you lapse at any point in this, you're not going to want to have constant communication with the customer. You just want them to wait. It doesn't work that way. So, better way to do it. One-piece flow. Google one-piece flow. Watch YouTube videos about one-piece flow. There's this awesome YouTube video where there's just a green screen with dots, and it shows you how things moving through processes in one-piece flow finishes the entire batch of sold work. So if you sold 10 hammers, you can get through the 10 hammers faster overall if you make them one at a time, start to finish. I know that this sounds crazy. And there is a limitation here. One-piece flow could be that you make 2 at a time. But by shrinking your batch sizes down and experimenting with this and seeing what size they should truly be at to get maximum efficiency, your orders that are sold get handled faster. So Jim's number 1, that first order, ships the first day that you're making hammers. You've got him done. You've moved on to the next hammer. And the feeling of fulfillment and accomplishment when you do them one at a time is fantastic. But there's another thing here. There's something that when people are working on a small scale miss, and that's quality. When you start working in batches, you can have a failure point at any stage of that build. You could be in process 4, and let's say you quenched wrong. If you make 1 and you quench it wrong, you've broken 1. If you have set everything up to quench 40 and you quench 40 before you realize that your quench was bad, that's a way larger failure. And so catching mistakes before they get brought on to the next is huge. Another thing is, as you're working, you're going to be improving that process, especially if you're working alone and by yourself. And this is a huge component of lean. Constant, continuous improvement. If you're doing the whole process one at a time, you're going to have to fight to make those processes hyper efficient. When you're being batchy, you feel like you're being efficient already. It lessens that sense of urgency to batch. This brings up another thing, and this is kind of something I want to touch on. I don't know how long this video is getting. There's a tag word in lean that you never really interact with if you're not an industrial guy, if you're not in manufacturing, and that's SMED. SMED, single minute exchange of dies. I'm a press builder. I think about this. If I need to change the die of a 2,500 ton press, when Toyota was beginning this process of improving and thinking about how and why they do things, A die change could take 2 days. You've got 8 hours of setup. You've got testing to check that when you're stamping big parts, you've got to know that everything's set perfectly. You might spend 2 days on that. But you need to be able to change it in a minute if you're going to be producing one. Right? That forces you to deal with a problem rather than saying, well, yeah, but I'm amortizing this time over 1,000 parts. Yeah, but what happens when something goes wrong and you have to scrap that 496 parts that you did get to? All right, I'm bringing it in here. So, when we designed our presses, the reason that we designed the dies swap in and out really quick was because we recognize if you're building one at a time. I'm alluding a little bit. That's not totally true. We just wanted it to be quick. But the more I've learned about industry, I've realized, as a producer, if I'm going to set up to make hammers and I need to be able to swap those dies out, on one hammer, so that I can get through the total process of forging that hammer in a press really super quick, I've got to be able to swap those dies out super fast. So single minute exchange of dies. This came about. So they did this. They said, okay, we've got to get this process down. It cannot take 2 days because we don't have the resources to make that many parts at one time. They were seeing how Ford was doing it, and they were having presses built for a die set. So that press, when they did a model change, this goes back to the whole thing where Henry Ford was like, no, I'm going to build one car forever. I'm going to buy presses, have them commissioned for this die set. If you change the dies, you have to buy a new press. So the thought process here is, if you're making one, start to finish, you've got to be able to swap dies quickly. It forces you to think about, how can I stage my dies in my work so that I can move from this process to this process, throw it back in the forge, swap my dies out, pull it back out of the forge, do my second heat. Now you're talking about real efficiency. Because the efficiency that you improve and work towards is directly affecting, man, we're getting some good words in here. We're directly affecting, I feel like a college professor. I think I found my calling. Are you ready for this? Throughput. You're affecting throughput. You're affecting how much work is leaving your shop. If you're making, I'm just going back to hammers. If you're making hammers, you're getting paid per hammer that you make and sell. So make hammers that you're selling as you sell them. You don't want to have this massive inventory sitting. I finished 400 hammers, I'm going to ship, throughout the year. But you're carrying the costs, and let's say you paid for the materials with credit and you don't have the cash flow to pay it off. Those are getting more expensive and you're losing your profit margin as they sit there and wait. It's kind of a messy, but stick with me. So if you're directly affecting throughput by making your process more efficient, and this is really speaking to a single person shop, 2 or 3 people shop maybe, when you start growing and expanding and you've got a whole series of processes, now we need to start talking about the total throughput of all these people working, rather than just making, for example, I'm going to make this one process, this one assembly process, super fast, so efficient. It doesn't matter. It doesn't affect throughput. He's just handing his part to the next guy in line faster. But it doesn't mean that more parts are shipping. If you're affecting the efficiency of you, and you're the only person in your shop, bam, you're going to be hitting throughput like crazy, because you're going to be making things and shipping them out the door faster. Every little improvement that you make. Because when you make something, you move on to the next process and move on to the next process and ship it, and then you start back at the beginning. I think this is a great opportunity. And so if you're curious about how this kind of stuff could affect you, you're in a small shop, you're wanting to start a business, you're defining vision, any of that stuff, you want to talk about it, reach out to me at Brent Blacksmith on Instagram, or you can either email Nate No, Nathan at brantblacksmith.com or info at brantblacksmith.com. I super look forward to the opportunity to talk to you about this stuff. And if there's any value that I can bring you, any ideas that you want to bounce off me, anything, just reach out and let me know. I'm super appreciative of the time that you've taken to watch this super long video. I hope this was informative and it has your gears turning. Let me know if it does.